G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do another one of my videos on muzzle brakes. This video on muzzle brakes is about the efficiency of muzzle brakes, so the effectiveness, how well they work, but it's really in comparison to things and what you need, I suppose, in the way of what suits what you're looking for in the way of your firearm. A couple of things. One, fitting into the brackets, as a lot of things, the comment that bigger isn't always better. So a more efficient, a more effective muzzle brake isn't necessarily what you want. The other is also, and this is out of a little bit of probably some lack of understanding in some tests that have been done that talk about particular things. One in particular, a recent test from a manufacturer, which went through using a particular rifle, and I've seen quite a few of these over the years, using one particular rifle and then putting on different muzzle brakes on the front of that rifle, using the same load, the same rifle, and then testing between all the different muzzle brakes to come which was the best one, or which used more, which produced more retardation or recoil retardation, or number of ports, or all that sort of stuff. Tests that are very thorough in their own little place of what they're actually doing, but tests that weren't quite as comprehensive as the layman might think. Okay, so what I want to explain there. First off, as I started off, bigger isn't always better. What I'm actually talking about there is having a muzzle brake that makes the rifle seemingly less and less recoil to shoot isn't necessarily the best way to do things. Enough retardation, enough effectiveness of your muzzle brake is probably the best amount. What do I mean by that? The way a muzzle brake reduces recoil is actually, there's some negatives attached to it. It takes a hit of air, and there's a hit of air that happens just before the release of the bullet, as well as the majority of after the bullet. But that is all stopping. Basically, there was force going one way, which is the force of the equal and opposite of the gases and the bullet that are all firing out one direction. The more gas, the heavier the bullet, the more force going that way, the more recoil going this way. The muzzle brake works by bouncing against, basically taking the force of the majority of that gas, or a good hunk of that gas, and bouncing it off something at the front. The bullet keeps going, the gas hits the front here, and that pushes back forward on the rifle. So it causes a bit of retardation. And that means the more gas, and the bigger the surfaces, or the more ports, in a crude way of looking at it, but actually the more surface area for that gas to hit against, and the more times that can actually be hitting against that gas that's going forward, the more retardation you get. But like I said, it's actually a funny process of when it actually happens, and there are some negatives attached to it. Now, if your rifle is jumping, or it's really kicking really hard, and you're trying to do it all with the muzzle brake, yes, you might make it less recoil to shoot, not necessarily nicer to shoot. In some cases there can be more blast back on your face, in other cases there can be a funny wriggle happening because of the way that's working. There's all sorts of things that mean that having a monster muzzle brake on a mild shooting firearm to try and end up with a firearm that it does almost nothing when you shoot it isn't necessarily going to be nicer to shoot, and isn't necessarily going to be more accurate to shoot. So an appropriate size, what I'm trying to say, is the best way to go. And I would go, as I'll come back to, with the manufacturers, the muzzle brake manufacturers' recommendations is a good idea in that situation. But I want to get into the tests that you're seeing and actually explain them a little bit. And I suppose the best way I can test this is actually to talk about where my testing logic comes from and where I had to learn a lot of years ago. I was a mechanic, and this is in the mid-80s, and I was involved in race teams, or a race team, building a engine for a touring car, the precursor to the V8 supercars, and I was helping build and design that car and the engine, and do the engine development and all that sort of stuff. We got to a place where we'd sort of got enough bits and pieces. I was only getting more and more involved with the engine team, and we'd got to the level where we had designed the engine, and this is a 5-litre Holden engine and a Walkinshaw Commodore, for those people who know what I'm talking about. But we'd it was a homologated engine. There's all sorts of good bits and pieces that came with that engine, but then we have to do all the other work. So there's things that we had to work with in a race car, things that had to be a particular thing so it could be legal to race, but there are other things that were open for us to be able to play with. We started playing with the headers, or the part of the headers that we could work with, or the extractors, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, the exhaust manifolds. And we started playing with them, working them out. What I realized quickly into this when I started to think about it, and I was just a lowly team member, but when I started to think about it, was we started to do this work and we were getting some test results and things, and making different headers and getting some results and things like that. And then we changed to camshaft, and all the data changed, and our team went down the road of a particular direction as to what they understood. I became a doubter of simple tests right there and then, because I realized that actually to test the exhaust part of that engine, you have to test each bit goes with every other part of that engine. So the moment you changed a port shape, or you changed a compression ratio, or you changed a camshaft, or you changed an intake run, or you changed any part of that engine that was in the front of the engine, it was going to affect the back of the engine. So it meant to do one test, like changing a header size, a secondary pipe on a header, to change that, even just change the size of it. That's all the test you're doing. To actually do it properly, you have to do it with all the different potential combinations you're going to do up the front. So what it meant is, to develop any one component when all the components are flexible, you would have literally millions of dollars of testing to do, literally thousands of tests to do one thing properly. If you have a set thing, a set engine, a set component, and then you can adjust things, you can make the headers to work perfectly with that one engine if the engine's not changing. But the moment you can change another component, you need to do all the cross-referencing, all the changes. If there's 5 camshafts and there's 5 exhaust systems, there's 25 tests you've got to do before you even start the process. What I'm actually trying to say, without getting too more complicated down that road, is to test a muzzle brake in any real level. If you're testing on a particular rifle, well, I should say in that situation, a particular weight rifle with a particular cartridge, and more to the point, the particular cartridge, then you can test all the different numbers of ports and actually end up with the result of what's most effective on that. Let's say you've got a 6.5 Creedmoor and you're going to try different muzzle brakes on it. Well, let's just go with one of those parameters. Exactly the same design muzzle brake, but with different numbers of ports. Then you're going to find out where is your most efficient, and when it stops being efficient or stops making real gains for more and more ports. Seen a couple of tests like that. The moment you change let's just go with the cartridge, the moment you take it from a 6.5 Creedmoor and turn it into a 7mm Rem Mag, or turn it into a 6.5 PRC, or turn it into a 338 Lapua, or turn it into any other cartridge, that test has fundamentally changed. And the simple bit that I can tell you out of what I know already, and the testing I've done, but also just the logic of the process as well, so the two things marry up very nicely, is that the more gas you've got going out, not the size of the bullet, not the weight of the bullet, not the size of the bullet, not the caliber of the rifle, but the cartridge and the amount of powder that's in there, the more powder you've got, the more muzzle brake you can use. In a very simple form, if you've got a 6.5 Creedmoor, then generally in my design of muzzle brakes, the 3-port works very effectively there. 2-port's okay, 3-port's better, 4-port you're not going to see a lot of gains because you don't have enough gas to use the other ports. If you go to a 300 Win Mag, a 300 PRC, then the 2-port is not really enough in my sort of design. The 3-port will work depending on the weight of the rifle. The 4-port is probably going to be more effective, and you use it, you'll see a decent gain from it. Going to a 5-port, you're probably going too far. And then whether you're going down, whether it's a 223, where a 2-port's okay, 3-port works fine, but the 2-port's all you really need. And then you go up to the 33XC or the 408 Shaytak or the 416 Barrett, that sort of stuff. And what we're actually talking about there is we went from 20 odd grains with the 223 40 odd grains with the 6.5 Creedmoor. There's 70 odd grains with the 7mm Rem Mag, 70 or 80 grains with the 7mm Rem Mag or the 300 PRC or the 300 Win Mag, and you're going to 110, 120 grains with your 33XC, and you go to your 140, 150 grains with your 408s, 200 grains with your 416s, 230, 240, 250 grains with your 50 BMG. Now it's a lot more complex than that. What powder you're using, all that sort of changes. But as you can see, it's actually amount of gas, which is what that powder turns into, as to how many ports you can use and what's probably going to be more effective. Now, as I said, that was very crude, and I was talking about my muzzle brakes at that stage. Very simple, nice wide body, but simple plain ports. There are a lot more things to muzzle brakes. There are 2-port muzzle brakes for 50 BMGs. And what we're actually talking about there is surface area. So whether it's numbers or width or size or the shape of it, there's all sorts of things, or whether they're angled back and all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of things that I've done quite a few videos and more comprehensive videos explaining how all that stuff works. But that can also change things. Yes, you can have a 2-port that works on a 50 BMG. And yes, you can have a 6-port that's still about right for the likes of a 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, generally, as I said, it depends on the design of things, and there are some nuances to go with this. But I would come back to a very simple thing. As I started with, I would listen to what the manufacturer has to say. The design of the muzzle brake is generally going to be designed, if it's a good manufacturer that know what they're doing, they're shooters, they know what they're doing, they're going to be able to help you go where that goes. And yes, there is a small place where you've got a lighter rifle. It's only a 7mm Rem Mag, but it's only an 8-pound rifle. Yes, a little bit of a bigger muzzle brake will help in that situation. It isn't just go bigger. I really don't like recoil, so putting on a 6-port muzzle brake is going to, on my 6.5 Creedmoor or on my 308 or on my 243, because I really don't like recoil, it probably isn't going to really work because you don't have the gas there. You don't have the amount of powder to use the more of the muzzle brake. And it's not always positive too. Just simply putting on to where your muzzle brake is doing more of the controlling things doesn't necessarily give you a better shooting rifle. So as I started with, enough is probably about right. There's a general idea. In most cases, the manufacturer is going to be helping you with those sort of things. But there's simple tests of what gives you this amount of recoil or how many ports is best. I think that was one of the comments I've heard. What is the perfect muzzle brake? How long's a piece of string? Is my answer. It really comes into so much more in the design of things. And really, as in all things in a rifle, it's about the whole combination. So if you use the general guide of what's there, then you're going to make sense of things. I have other videos, like I said, that explain more about what muzzle brakes are doing. I prefer very simple muzzle brakes that are designed to work effectively with precision rifles like I shoot them. And I want them also not just to provide recoil retardation, I also want them to stop the percussion that a muzzle brake can cause, so they're just nicer to shoot with. Because just because a rifle's got a little bit of push to it doesn't make it unpleasant. It's when it either cracks you hard, pushes you too hard, or blasts you in the face. Those are all things that make shooting unpleasant. And that's a very important feature to come into making sense of what muzzle brake's going to suit you. Anyway, as I said, there's another muzzle brake, there's another comprehensive muzzle brake video I've done to refer to if you want to know more about those other details. But as to what's the best number of ports, how long's a piece of string? Anyway, guys, I hope that makes some sense. Thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.